Well, now that I have your attention, welcome to our earthquake panel on our big one. Thanks for coming. When we started planning this, we were going to hold it up in the Norm Dix Government Center in the conference room with about 100, 150 seats. And we're here, and it's, half full upstairs, and this is just incredible. I want to say thank you to all you folks for showing up and showing so much interest in this topic. This is just blows us away at the Kitsap Center. We're really proud of that. My name is David Nelson. I'm the editor of The Sun, and I'll kind of be the host to walk us through the evening with our guests here. Before I do that, I'm going to say thanks to just a couple of people who deserve a lot of credit for putting this all together. That starts with the editorial team in the Sun's newsroom that worked on this story for quite a while last fall, published it in January. I hope everyone here has read that, taken some time to digest a lot of information that we published. And those folks, the team was led by local news editor Kim Rubenstein, and then reporters Tristan Bowrick, Christopher Dunnigan, Ed Friedrich, Tad Suter all contributed. Photographers Megan M. Reed and Larry Stiegel, and graphic designer Deandra Spisak. And Deandra is the person behind this. I see them on all the tables, and I understand we're out of these. This is a great little resource. It was actually in the Sun on Sunday, so you may have seen it there, but this is a little higher quality version. You can pin on the wall. If you want one, even though we don't have any, if you go to kitsapsun.com/earthquakes, there's a PDF there. You can print it out, you can share it with friends, share it with family, use social media, or just download it and email it. We want to make that available because I think there is a lot on there that's worth having and worth kind of keeping around. The other people I'd like to mention, Jeremy Judd and Mike Stevens. They are two directors at The Sun who've really done a lot of work on the organization for this event, the promotion, coordinating everything, getting the building, so thanks to those guys. We wanted to thank Shar Burnett and John from over at BCAT. They are filming tonight's event, and they're going to show it. I think the first showing is Saturday morning at 10, and then there's another Saturday afternoon at 4:30, and then they'll be showing a few others subsequent to that. I'm not sure on all the dates. Maybe it's as they fill in their calendar. But if you have someone that couldn't come tonight, tell them it's going to be on television this weekend. And then the last people to say thanks to is Tim Hoffman, Nate Murphy, and Brian Johnson at the Admiral, because like I said, we were planning to be in another building. We called the Admiral at the last minute, and they were very generous. Luckily, they were free tonight, gave us a room without a charge, so that's real community service that they did too. So, like you all know, this conversation follows on the reporting we did in January, the big story about the Seattle fault, and how to be prepared for it, and how the organizations and the agencies in the county are preparing for it. The goal was to kind of educate people through that story, to kind of raise the awareness and get people going, and the feedback we heard was so much that we invited these folks here. A lot of people said, I want to know more, and so hopefully we get that chance tonight. And here's how it's going to work. I'm going to first introduce the folks here, and then I'll invite our two friends from FEMA to do a short presentation. Then we have some questions that have been emailed in already, some stuff that you guys wanted to know. But what we'll also do is allow you to ask questions. If there's things here you hear and want to respond to, or if there's a question you had in mind and just didn't get to us before we organized this, when we get to that point, I'll kind of say, start thinking or something like that, and then there will be some folks walking around with microphones. Raise your hand. We'll do as many as we can. We're going to try to be done. 7:30 is the posted time, but we could probably push that a little bit if we need to. So we'll answer as many questions as we can from the crowd when we get to that. Sitting up with me, the 7 folks who've come, who we also need to say thank you to. Thank you all for coming. Before we even start, because they've taken their time and very generous to do that. From the, well, that'd be your left on the table, we'll start Kelly Stone, who's a risk analyst for FEMA. She works on projects that analyze the risk related to various natural hazards. She works with state agencies and community organizations to discuss risk and how mitigation can be used to create a more resilient community. Next to her is Gala Galasic, also of FEMA. She coordinates the National Earthquake Hazard Reduction Program for Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. This program provides seismic technical assistance and training and supports mitigation efforts implemented by state-level emergency management. Next to her is Tim Walsh. He is the Chief Hazards Geologist for the Washington Geological Survey at the Department of Natural Resources. He is a founding member of the National Tsunami Hazard Mitigation Program, a member of the Washington State Seismic Safety Committee, a member of the Pacific Northwest Steering Committee of the Advanced National Seismic System, and a board member of the Cascadia Region Earthquake Work Group. Next to him is Joe Smiley, a public outreach officer for the Department of Natural Resources, specializes in areas of geology, aquatics, and tribal affairs. And then our local guys, there's Mike Gordon, who Mike directs the Kitsap County Department of Emergency Management, which includes coordinates all the county assets in times of emergency, including the Emergency Operations Center. Next to Mike is Steve Wright. Steve's the chief of South Kitsap Fire and Rescue and has been with that agency for nearly 30 years. And at the end of the table is Scott James. Scott's a Bainbridge Island resident and he's the author of the upcoming book, Prepared Neighborhoods. Scott's background is in marketing and entrepreneurs, and he's been recognized in Forbes and Business Week. He works with a group called Prepared Neighborhoods. And what they do is they do workshops, they work with neighbors on Bainbridge Island and with the fire department up there to kind of get the word out on things. He was featured prominently in the stories we did, so if you want to learn more about Scott and how to get in touch with him, feel free to check back and find that. One last thing, oh no, I'm going to let you guys talk now. Not one last thing. Kelly, go ahead.
Should I talk from here?
Talk in there.
Okay. Great. Yes, you can hear me. Well, thanks everyone for coming. This is a great crowd, and a lot of this information that we were able to do in our risk assessment was incorporated into the Sun article. So we're really happy that we were able to get a lot of this work out there and to raise more awareness. So if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to give you a background on why FEMA did this risk assessment. And this is part of what we call our risk MAP program. And MAP is an acronym standing for Mapping, Assessment, and Planning. And there are 4 kind of steps to this program. So our first is to identify risk. So what type of hazards do exist in certain areas? And we're looking at multi-hazard, so not just earthquakes, but also tsunami, landslides, and as well as flooding. And then we assess that risk. So we were able to take information on the built environment and assess how those hazards would impact that risk. And then communicating that risks. We have done some outreach and meetings with local government staff, with cities and the county, to kind of give them an overview of this risk assessment and how it can be used. And luckily enough, the timing worked out really well to incorporate some of this into the Kitsap Sun article. And our whole goal of this program is to really mitigate risk. So when we talk mitigation, we mean trying to do an action that will make something more resilient. And I'll show you some examples of what that can be. That can be at a larger scale, like retrofitting an entire building, or it could be just small scale, strapping your water heater. And this project was started as part of actually a coastal flood study. So FEMA is updating all of our coastal floodplain maps for all of Puget Sound and the outer coast. That's kind of the impetus of this, but now we've done this multi-hazard risk assessment, and this is occurring for every county along the Sound and the outer coast. So this type of data will be available for all those communities. And so in our risk assessment, if we want to go to the next slide, and this very similar graphic was put in the Sun's article as well. FEMA was able to utilize information from our partner, Washington Department of Natural Resources, to get information on earthquakes, tsunamis, and landslides. So utilizing that information, as well as local county information, which was including parcel and assessors data, so trying to get that information on the built environment, we were actually able to determine, what buildings are going to be most at risk to earthquakes. And a lot of the information that goes into that, like unreinforced masonry buildings are going to have a lot more damage, whereas newer modern buildings are going to have better earthquake codes, and so the damages there are going to be smaller. So we created this risk assessment and gave this to the county and the cities, and Our focus was for the Seattle 7.2 magnitude event, but as many of us know, in the Puget Sound area, there are multiple faults, as well as the Cascadia subduction zone that we're at risk to. So we just chose this scenario because it was had the most impact to the county, but a lot of the area that we all live in Puget Sound is, of course, in earthquake country. And so the point of this assessment was to be able to help inform local governments better identify where they want to do future mitigation. So the county and many of the cities have a local hazard mitigation plan. And in that plan, they strategize where they actually want to do mitigation. So some of that might be they want to retrofit schools, or maybe upgrade bridges, or retrofit government facilities. So the information that we provided as part of this risk assessment can be used to inform where future mitigation projects could occur in Kitsap County. And it also raises awareness. Like I said, the timing for this worked out really well, that we were able to highlight some of this information in the Sun article, just to get the word out there that, as a great reminder, that we do live in earthquake country. We should be thinking about this and start getting better prepared. And next slide. And so some of the ways that you in the audience here can use this information, and now that you're kind of more informed of the earthquake risk, is there's a lot of small things that can be done. So just a couple photos up here of just bookshelves falling in your house, so things hanging on your walls, mirrors, TVs, bookshelves. If none of those are strapped properly, then they can easily fall on you, your family, your pets. Obviously, a lot of people get trapped. So in earthquakes especially, it's not necessarily building collapse, it's things that could potentially fall on you within the building and outside of the building. So a lot of times if a building shakes, bricks on the outside are going to fall as well. So a lot of fatalities and injuries come from not having these things strapped down properly. So being able to do that in your home to better really strap anything that could fall, like strapping your water heater is really key, because that could easily fall, that's going to ruin all of your floors. And just start strapping your bookshelves and strapping your TV, just trying to do those things to minimize those hazards. Because if an event were to occur, you might have to be in your house to shelter there for quite a while, so you want to be able to stay in that location. Some other things, another really common thing, and this happened all over Napa in their 2014 earthquake, is a lot of our chimneys are going to fall. And so those might not just fall outside your house, but inside your house. And so that's just a stark graphic of the type of damage that could occur. So on the structural side, there are things you could do to your home, such as securing the fireplace, bolting that and bracing that to your house, bolting the structure to the foundation. So there are a lot of things structural-wise that you can do, but also in the home as well. And then finally, there's a lot we can do just for family preparedness. So I'm guessing a lot of people that live over here do work in Seattle or on that side. So if you're not able to get home for days, who is going to maybe take care over and watch your children and your pets? Starting to better plan that out with your neighbors of how you're going to communicate with no cell phone. How are you going to get somewhere if you don't have a bridge to get it, if the bridge is damaged? I carry tennis shoes in my car every day with that if an earthquake does happen, I'm just going to leave my car and walk home to be able to get to my family. So it's trying to think more about developing that plan with your family of what you're going to do, who that main contact is going to be, and how you would communicate if there isn't any phone. And ready.gov, so we had that at the bottom. Ready.gov is a great website that shows a lot of these things, what you can check on in your home to make sure that everything's securely strapped, but also how you as a family can develop a better plan. And then another thing that you can do is do earthquake drills. In Washington, in Washington, we have the Great Washington Shakeout. This is an annual earthquake drill that occurs in October. And you can register for this as an individual or as a family. A lot of schools and businesses register for this. And this is a great opportunity to just really focus on drop, cover, and hold on, because that's really what you need to do during an earthquake. You have to try to get under something if you can, because we do expect, lighting fixtures and ceilings to potentially come tumbling down. So this is an event that FEMA participates in. A lot of state, local agencies participate in as well. We just have a little short video of a shakeout drill, if we want to play that.
This is an earthquake drill. Right now, drop, cover, and hold on. Drop to the floor now. During a large earthquake, the ground might jerk strongly and knock you down.
So they grab their coffee, because we're in the Seattle area. But it is something. If you feel shaking right away, you need to try to get under a structure, or at least cover your head, to ensure that you're not going to actually have any injuries happen to you. So definitely go to Washington, www.shakeout.org. That's a great site to register and just practice as well. And then that's also a good time just annually to kind of revisit the family plan, maybe look at your disaster supplies, make sure you have enough food and water. Because if we did have an event like this, it could be a very long time before all of our utilities are restored. So that was just kind of a short overview of what FEMA did as part of the risk assessment, and hopefully this just brings more awareness. I mean, it was, like I said, it was great to partner with the Kitsap Sun, and ideally we want to, you guys to use this data to be better prepared to go home and start, strapping things down and bracing them, and developing a family with your a plan with your family. Because for all of us in Puget Sound, every day is earthquake season. So it's not something that we expect our high winds every year. But this is something we should be thinking about every day and start planning for. So thank you.
Like Kelly said, it was not coincidental that we published our story at the same time that this study was coming out. We were aware of it, we were waiting for it. And so that was our impetus. And I know the rest of the folks at the table here were also either involved in helping with this study or at least aware of it. And so now I was going to ask Tim and Joe first to kind of give your reactions to the process behind the FEMA study and kind of what the state role is in using this to communicate with the public.
Well, I'd take a slightly different spin on it because my agency we're a science agency, at least my part of it, we're the State Geological Survey. So we contributed technical information to this study, and we cooperate with all of the emergency management agencies around to help them understand how to use this kind of information to do their own preparedness. But we defer to the emergency management organizations and the responder organizations to know how to do that, because they're the people who are familiar with their individual communities and all of the quirks of their communities that are important in figuring out how to make use of this kind of information.
Yeah, that's really important. We also, with our wildfire expertise, we contribute a lot to the incident management teams that would be in and covering an earthquake and responding.
Tim, maybe you could give us a better idea of some of the science then. What should people understand about that Seattle fault line?
Well, so the Seattle fault has actually been suspected since at least 1894, which is the first paper that I've seen that discussed it. They didn't obviously understand what it was exactly, but they knew that that Bainbridge Island, southeast corner of it at Restoration Point, had been uplifted and had marine shells, clams and oysters, sitting on an upland that's 20 feet above sea level today. So there have been a lot of studies that have been done of it since then, and as so often happens in science, they lead to ambiguity. And so we know a great deal about the Seattle fault, but we don't really know what it's going to do the next time it does something large. But we have some constraints on it. So the The discussion that went into the risk map report was for a magnitude 7.2 earthquake, which is a pretty large earthquake, and if that were to happen in this area, the damage would be quite devastating. But it's also possible that it could make a smaller earthquake, say a magnitude 6.5, which would still have very significant consequences. The Northridge earthquake, for instance, was a magnitude 6.6. So that would be comparable in size, and an earthquake that size would happen more frequently than would a 7.2. So these are scenarios that we are putting forward that give you an idea what might happen, but they're not roadmaps. And the same is true for the study that went into this of the tsunami that it might generate. We know that the last large event on the Seattle Fault, which happened sometime between 905 and 930 AD for reasons that are very complicated and I won't go into, we know that it generated a tsunami that left deposits at West Point, that left deposits on Whidbey Island at Cultus Bay. We know also that that earthquake caused large landslides throughout the Southeast Olympics and also in Lake Washington and Lake Sammamish. So we know that it was a very serious event, but we have no reason to believe that the next event will look exactly like that. We use that as an example. The tsunami study that went into the risk map report that Kelly talked about was done by a visiting scientist from Japan named Shunichi Koshimura, who was visiting at PMEL, the Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory at NOAA out at Sandpoint. And his goal was just to see if he could reproduce what it seemed like the tsunami from AD 905 to 930 must have looked like. So that's the only study we have right now of a Seattle Fault generated tsunami here in the Bremerton area. We've done some modeling for it in Seattle and in Everett and Tacoma, but not here. That's something we're going to be doing in the upcoming year. What Koshi did will not be exactly what's going to happen next time, because the last time it happened, sea level was about 1 meter lower than it is today. It will be significantly different. Also, what Koshi did was at a fairly low resolution. He built his model on grid cells that were 90 meters across, 300 feet across on each of these grid cells. And so that generalizes what would actually happen quite a bit. So all of that being said, we want you to understand that the information that went into this is valid, but it has large uncertainties. Error bars that might be 20, 30, 40% on top of what we put in here. So that's one of the keys that I want you to take away from this. The hazard analyses that go into this are not a roadmap, they're a collage.
You want to add something? Go ahead.
Yeah. So I just want to add that on top of it not being a prediction of the future, you know, as emergency managers and as an agency, we try to consider the most complex and difficult scenario that could happen, because we want to consider how best we can serve the public. And one of the biggest challenges we have is that after an earthquake happens, we might not have the ability to know what actually is happening out in the field or out where you are, because maybe we can't contact anyone over there, or all we have is what's coming in from the media. And so if we, as much as we can do, we model a scenario that could happen that is the most complex, so that when a earthquake happens, we are best prepared to push forward in actions that could help without wasting any time. And one thing that we're doing just like that is in the past, in 2012, we actually did a Seattle Fault earthquake exercise to do just that. On the same very similar scenario, as an emergency management community, we discussed how best we would serve the public. So it's really great that articles like this and the New Yorker New Yorker article are bringing so much attention in the community, because as an emergency management community, we've known that it's been a problem for quite a while, or at least for some time, and we've been planning for it. So, thank you.
It's a good segue to turn it over to our local guys. If you could talk about that, planning for something so complex. I know each of you have a slightly different angle on that, so maybe Mike can go first, and then Steve and Scott.
Well, you can imagine from us and the number of hazards you have associated with Kitsap County, there's a lot of planning going on, and associated with planning, we do lots of exercises. We were part of the Evergreen Earthquake exercise a couple of years ago. Last year, we did a variety of different exercises with the Navy. So we're always planning, we're always training, we're always exercise. And from our approach, from emergency management, it's really a holistic approach. We're trying to be out in your neighborhoods and your communities to help you map your neighborhoods and do a better job of preparing yourself and allow you, because you're going to be the first responders in your homes. The next step is for us to make sure we can get into businesses to help them support preparedness plans, and then to make sure that our responders like Steve Wright sitting next to me, that we're all working together and collaborating so we can all respond as one unit and do the best we can for the citizens of Kitsap County. And I appreciate all this data and this risk map report. We've been waiting for a couple of years from now. You can currently go on our website and see our mitigation plan, which was approved by FEMA back in 2014 for the cities and the county that has a lot of the same strategies and a lot of the same output that we hope to push forward here in the near future with our commissioners and our cities in order to look at some of those strategies and see how we can mitigate from earthquakes and landslides in the future.
Well, I'm here tonight somewhat representing all of the fire agencies in Kitsap County. There's 6 agencies spread across our county, and we all work very closely together. And I would say if there's going to be one theme that I think the other 5 chiefs are hoping I present here is the importance of the preparation, the planning, the mitigation pieces that can happen beforehand. Because for the fire service, we are in the communities every day as responders, and our component following an event is going to be as responders, but we are also busy on the day-to-day routine of what we do, medical and fire responses. And if you put in a component as significant as an event like this, to say we're going to be overwhelmed would be a very significant understatement. With that, then, the idea that everyone here who's interested in showing interest in some preparedness, taking care of those components that you can in your home, your neighborhood, those pieces are going to allow us to basically dust ourselves off, get ourselves organized. As Mike said, the county comes together under several different plans. We refer to them as our area command plan, and they all answer up to the emergency operating procedure, where Mike's at up at the DEM. We all function underneath that plan, but the idea in South Kitsap, I have 17 responders on duty minimum each day, plus a contingent of volunteers in our community. If you think about it, I have 74,000 citizens in my community, and if you do the math on that, that's going to be spread pretty thin if all 74,000 people need help all at one time. So the component of us getting on our feet, organizing, and then focusing our efforts on the greatest needs as determined through the EOC and the DEM. It's going to be one of those kind of scenarios where to get to the neighborhoods, to get to the individual homes is going to be quite a ways down that list. And so if you leave here tonight with anything, the component of being ready to be self-sufficient, take care of yourself, try to be able to work as neighborhoods is going to be an important piece that I hope you'll leave with.
Which leads to...
Perfect.
That was good.
Yeah.
I think what you can tell is as we've moved down this direction, there starts to become a common theme, which is our professionals from federal to county know what they're doing, and they have our faith and our trust in them. And as the chief said, they will be overwhelmed in a widespread event. In a widespread event, an incident like this, life will get very local very quickly. And think about that for a moment. Roads will become impassable. You will not be able to get from point A to point B. And preparedness, the common theme that you're seeing as it's coming down the table here, will be tantamount. And what I'd like to encourage you to do is to think of that preparedness not as a solo effort. The lone survivalist in a bunker with a bunch of food is not what we are going for here. What's stronger is group resilience. What's stronger is neighborhoods, neighbors that talk to each other, that love on each other, that have encouraged each other to prepare. And I think that's been the focus of my books that I started writing a few years ago when a fellow named Bruce Barcott wrote a similar article in Outside Magazine. It didn't cause quite the uproar that the New Yorker piece did on social media, but I actually think it was an even better article, along the lines of what Tristan and company have written from Kitsap Sun. The key there is it's not about individual preparedness. It's not just good enough to go home tomorrow and stop by Costco and buy a whole bunch of potable water. What I'd prefer you to do is go home tomorrow and say, we're going to throw a party for our neighbors. And there's only one thing I want you to do before you throw that party, and that's to stop by one of the fire stations and get the Map Your Neighborhood program that Mike's got here. Can you hold that up, Mike? Dr. Luann Johnson created this. This is used all over the country. A ton of states have used this, but it's homegrown. It was made here in Olympia. I liked it so much, I asked Luann, she's my editor of my book. So it's an outstanding program. And through a simple, friendly party, you get to build relationships with those neighbors, including the grumpy ones that you never talk to. Because you never know when that grumpy neighbor is going to be a former EMT or be president of the ham radio club for your neighborhood. You never know.
I'm going to let Mike, can you give us a real quick commercial, that Map Your Neighborhood document that Scott just mentioned? Where, I understand the county has these, where do we get them?
Well, you have to get them from the county, okay? We get them from State Emergency Management, and I think we have about 1,000 of them. We're getting ready to do a promotion up in Paulsbo. You can go on our website at kitsapdem.org. We're going to be doing approximately 33 communities in the Paulsbo, what Mayor Erickson refers to as the greater Paulsbo area. And the idea is to bring people together as groups, bring in those folks that are going back to your homeowners association or your communities. They're going to have to introduce it to your homeowners and start mapping your neighborhoods. So you're welcome to join us on either April 19th or April 23rd, and you can see those dates on our website. But this is really all about how do you map your neighborhood in order to find out the skills and the equipment and all those things you need in your neighborhood when the disaster strikes. That could even be during a winter storm when the trees are down, power is out, and you're looking for that individual on your street that's got the generator that everybody can hear, right? So it's all about that. It's about knowing where the chainsaws are, the retired doctor or nurse or somebody that's in your neighborhood that can provide those skills in a disaster. Again, you're going to have to be self-sufficient for 4 to 7 days until we can get folks into your neighborhood. If you like, you can even step it up a notch. We provide services or team training called community emergency response teams that can bring somebody with advanced skills into your neighborhood that understands first aid, CPR, light search and rescue, and some other things that might be important to you when your community is all standing around during that disaster. The power is out. It's going to be out for an unlimited amount of time, and you're going to be looking for resources in order to make sure that everybody is taken care of. It helps also map folks who need help in your neighborhood, those with disabilities or those that just need that little extra support. And all they have to do is, if I'm okay, is turn this around, say okay in your window. Okay, it's in the window, we're doing okay. Go on to the next house, take care of them if they need help. And that's what Map Your Neighborhood is all about.
Outside of the personal preparedness, and you may have more questions about that, I want to talk about more of a policy question, and it may be for Mike, it may be for Steve also, or the FEMA folks. A lot of our fire stations in this county are old and do not meet seismic code, and there's a number of other public buildings that would be important in such a time like this. What is leadership, what do our public officials, what do our leaders need to do, what can they do to try to address that, and what risk do these buildings provide, or what risk do they pose to us right now?
Well, I'll take a shot at
Take a
that.
shot at the fire.
So as I referred to the 6 agencies that are in this county, the fire stations that are meeting code are obviously the newer ones, as anything else would apply to the neighborhoods, the commercial buildings. So anything that's built more recently is going to be built to a higher standard and be more sustainable. In each jurisdiction, and so South Kitsap I can speak to, I have 12 fire stations. And some of them go back into the 1960 range, which was a totally different set of codes back in those days. The newer ones obviously are more modern and are going to be more resilient to this type of event. But like anything else in a community, it's a question about the resources we have, where we're spending them, and what we're finding as our most chronic or most critical need. Versus the great what if that we all expect may happen. But again, there are things that are happening day to day that we spend our resources on. So for South Kitsap, I'm aware of the stations that are a little less prepared than others as far as their structure. The idea of how do we go about fixing that, it involves money, and whether we're spending it on the day-to-day response or whether we're mitigating or reinforcing a station that may be eventually taken out of our response criteria and sold off someday. Those are all decisions we're trying to make. As our agency, we looked at all of these things a couple of years ago when I became fire chief, and we went through and looked at our most critical needs. One of them was apparatus and equipment. Last fall, we presented to our voters a bond issue to upgrade our rolling stock, if you will, our fleet. We were successful, but that was the first successful bond for South Kitsap in the 70-year existence of the fire district. And so to go to them and say, hey, I want to build a bunch of fire stations because there might be an earthquake someday, the committee, the group, the staff, all of us made decision, well, one piece at a time. So in our case, for South Kitsap, we're working on updating our fleet, getting those components of our response caught up, if you will. The next piece of this will be addressing stations and modern stations, more resilient stations with our voters, but it's going to require a passage of a measure, a bond measure that's going to require taxation. No different than watching the school districts this last election go through. Some of them were successful, some of them weren't. All of those have to be taken into account. And in a group like this tonight, I would think everyone that's here is here because they're interested in this and would probably be supportive of something like that on a ballot. But all those things have to be played into very carefully in each community. I know Bainbridge is down in front here. I saw at Luke, and you guys are building a new fire station right now. It's going to be very modern and very resilient to earthquake standards. City of Bremerton has a few that are newer, a few that maybe are a little bit older. So virtually all 6 agencies have a little bit of each, and you know, we'd all like to solve that problem, but there are the day-to-day realities of what we're dealing with, and it all is driven by the money and the voter support that we need to make those corrections.
And I'd like to add kind of a peripheral project that's going on right now called Earthquake Early Warning that bears a little bit on this problem. It's possible to put seismometers out along the coast that would sense a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake before the strong shaking happens out here. And it's actually possible that there could be as much as 2 or 3 minutes of warning. And that's a big project. You might have seen it in the news a lot lately. The governor had a press release about it a couple of weeks ago. But one of the things along the lines of fire stations that would allow you to do is if you have 2 minutes of warning that there's going to be strong shaking, particularly on these older fire stations that might not be up to modern standards, you could open the doors so that the fire engines don't get trapped. There are all kinds of interesting things that you could do with that kind of notice, and it's something that really should come up from the community. We have some ideas of what the things are. Obviously, if you have a brain surgeon, it would be useful for him to take the scalpel out of someone's brain. That 2 minutes would give you enough warning for that. And at any given moment, there are many terabytes of unsaved information on the cloud. In 10 seconds, Microsoft could save everything to a secure location. But I invite all of you to think about ingenious ways that you could make use of that kind of information if you had a minute or two or even 3 minutes of advance warning.
Is there a communication plan or a strategy that goes with that? Is that too early to ask?
In process. We're going to be doing a workshop on that later this year.
Oh, okay. Good. That's very interesting to hear. If folks have questions, start raising your hands now, and we'll get our spotters to come around. It's the folks with the microphones. They're going to come to you. So, or track them down. Maybe while we wait, I want to ask Kelly. Can I ask you a question? What Steve's talking about with local funding for stations like that, what does the federal government do? Do they have programs where they will help communities? Is it FEMA's responsibility also to upgrade these buildings?
Yes, so we do have hazard mitigation assistance grants that can be given to local jurisdictions. And so the idea is that the hazard mitigation plan that the county and the cities have kind of rank and strategize on where they want to focus mitigation dollars. And they can apply to FEMA through the state to get those mitigation grant funds. So some perfect projects to that they could apply for, like school retrofits, fire station retrofits. So there is grant dollars available at the federal level. If there is an open federal disaster declaration, like we currently have, I think, a few of right now in Washington, that's a grant that could be applied for. And then we also just have annual grants that are competed across the nation. So there is opportunities there for local jurisdictions to apply for grants through FEMA and the state.
All right, first question.
Hi, can I get your name and where you're from?
Yeah, I'm Willem-Jan Bodingius. I work for MDC in Tacoma, and I work with low-income housing to make their energy bill a little bit more affordable. But where I want to go with this is indeed grant money, like Kelly mentioned. There are plenty of houses that have no foundation tied at all. So in any earthquake, if it walks up 6 inches of the foundation, it's red tagged and gone. So is there any grant money available or other funding that we can tie into to get these houses retrofitted?
You got any money?
Yeah, I mean, I think that potentially FEMA grants could be used to upgrade those structures, but also HUD, Housing and Urban and Development, also does have grants available, especially for low-income housing, that might be able to be utilized for that as well.
One thing I'll just add is that in Portland, you might have heard about this, they're actually starting a pilot program where FEMA has given $500,000 of grant money to support the retrofit of 150 homes, and it'll be covering just half of the price of that. So there is potentially a future there.
There also was a program about 20 years ago called Project Impact, and in Seattle they worked out a methodology that a very handy homeowner could do, or a contractor could do at fairly low cost, to tie a home to its foundation. And part of that process was that the local banks agreed to give low interest rate loans to support that program. And that was run out of the City of Seattle Emergency Management Department, and I believe you can still get all of those plans and all of that information there. And that also was tied to a tool bank at the Finney Ridge Neighborhood Center, where you could actually borrow concrete drills that would help you and learn how to use them, that would help you do some of that work yourself.
We've also got one from up here in the balcony. What's your name, sir?
I'm Jim Hochstein. I'm a retired mathematician, worked in the county 40 years. My question is about the water and sewer systems. Are there plans to mitigate problems with them?
Speaking from the county, I don't know of any local plans to do that. Obviously, that would take a lot of funding and a lot of initiative by the cities and the county in order to move forward to do something like that. Of course, the best thing right now is just to recognize what areas are the priority areas that provide water or sewage systems to local homeowners, and whether or not, or frankly, how much money it's going to cost in order to improve those systems and help them wade through an earthquake.
About 4 years ago, the Washington State Seismic Safety Committee put together a report called the Resilient Washington Initiative. And in that, we brought together utilities and railroads and highway engineers and the like. And we put together a strategy for making the state more resilient to earthquakes. This was specific to earthquakes. And the utility industries were very interested in forming a group that would be under the auspices of the state government to sort of create standards for how to go about that throughout the state. And that report is available on our website at www.dnr.wa.gov. You have to dig for it. Or also at State Emergency Management's website, which is www.mil.wa.gov. And again, you have to search for it, go into the Seismic Safety Committee, but you can get a hold of that report there. And you can help us as we ask our legislators and the governor's office to fund the initiative. As yet, they have funded little bits of it, but it would be really useful to put all of that together as a strategy that's funded and is comprehensive throughout the state.
Hi, I have a statement from the commissioner.
I'm Ed Wolf, County Commissioner with Charlotte Garrido, who's here tonight. The FEMA money is going like this. So this is really up to us in our community. My wife tonight is in our neighborhood in Bremerton, putting together a neighborhood to prepare and get ready. But my message is not really about money, because it's all about money. But my message is, a couple days ago, or a week ago, I'm out kayaking in Dyes Inlet, and I'm not thinking about that Seattle fault. I want people to be prepared and go to their basements or go to their garages, as we're doing at home, and getting prepared. And Mike, you tell us this all the time at the county. You know, just each individual, each family has to be prepared, because the money's not flowing in. But I will say that we've got to continue enjoying life. And we've got to be out there and do what we do and whatever we do in our community, and not just totally be obsessed, but be prepared individually in our families. That's my feeling.
One point to that excellent summary is being prepared at home, being prepared within your own family, your own home, your own apartment, your own neighborhood, brings massive dividends, even if the big one does not come in our lifetime. Even if the big one does not come in our children's lifetime or our grandchildren's lifetime, because the focus of prepared neighborhoods is all about relationships. And if you end up getting to know your neighbors better, you might end up finding that you enjoy growing food together, so you get a pea patch system together. You end up going kayaking. Those relationships pay dividends here and now before we ever have to deal with any kind of a widespread incident. And those relationships get stronger, which means that in a stressful situation, after an incident happens, we respond that much better. Instead of a reaction, which is kind of what we saw with the New York article, it was very much a fear-based reaction that we saw on social media. Instead, I'd prefer to see citizens responding, thinking through that. And that's possible by doing exactly what you were just saying, having those kinds of neighborhood conversations.
Hey, David, if I could take a question over here on the main floor, right side, before my constituents riot against me. Let's ask this lady, your name first.
Cindy Panacci.
And Cindy, where are you from?
Bremerton.
Bremerton, and what is your question?
It's about, I knew this was going to...
It's been a long time ago that she formed this question, believe me.
Oh, it's about a tsunami. I'm just wondering, in Kitsap County in Bremerton, is it possible that there would be a tsunami here? Would we be affected by it?
Absolutely. So the way a tsunami is generated typically is by an uplift on the seafloor. And what we can see at the southeast corner of Bainbridge Island at Restoration Point is evidence that about 1,000 years ago, the seafloor uplifted about 21 feet in one event. And that essentially creates a piston-like effect. And so that pushes the water up. The water then collapses into a long period wave. So we have evidence that the tsunami from that event between 9:05 and 9:30 AD hit West Point. It hit Cultus Bay at the south end of Whidbey Island. It left a strong signal at Gorst. And the modeling that went into the report that Kelly put together, the risk map report for the area, does show a low resolution model, but nonetheless it's a credible model of what might happen if that event were to recur. And one of the other things that we're doing, I represent, among other things, the National Tsunami Hazard Mitigation Program, which is a state and federal government partnership. And we are going to be doing some more modeling of what might happen specifically in the Bremerton area if we have another Seattle Fault earthquake and tsunami.
We've got another one up from the balcony here. Ma'am, your name?
Carmelina Johnson. I'm a homeowner in South Kitsap. You had mentioned the CERT program. I wanted to know, is Kitsap County going to maybe set up a program so we can all kind of participate in that and take care of our neighborhoods?
You bet. So far we've been doing CERT for about 2.5 years now. We started on Bainbridge Island a couple of years ago with this gentleman here, and we're now up to about 140 people that are in CERT. We're doing CERT a little bit differently in Kitsap County. We train people to CERT, and it takes about 10 sessions in order to be trained. It's actually CERT, the Community Emergency Response Team, is a national program, so we follow national standards for training and certification of our CERT team members. As you become a CERT team member, we also ask if you'll become a registered volunteer with Kitsap County so you can provide that support to us after the event is over and you have taken care of your community, and then we can call you up and ask you to help Kitsap County do a variety of other tasks in the local community. We generally try to do the CERT courses twice a year. We just finished one up with 30 graduates, and we plan on doing another one in the fall. So keep an eye on our website. After we get through this exercise we're doing in June, we'll start posting our next set of CERT courses that'll start somewhere, I speculate, in the August-September timeframe.
Particularly for this audience, since this is kind of a self-selected audience, you showed up here because you're interested. You very well may be prepared at home already, and you very well may have already done, or you might be doing it tonight, a Map Your Neighborhood party. If that is the case, as a fellow citizen, what I would encourage you to do is to take a look at your local CERT team and joining it. It's another one of those that pays dividends both after a widespread incident, but it will also pay dividends for the decades that might occur before then. It's a great way to have a civic responsibility to serve. Plus, you get to know local fire and EMT, which is not unhelpful whenever you need them to come to your house and resuscitate you, but they're your friend.
Question in the back.
Question back down here.
Hi, my name is Stacy Trevino. I'm a homeowner in East Bremerton. My question is, with the main message being to be prepared with all of these supplies we were given today, where is the best location to store those goods? I've heard a lot of conflicting opinions about an outdoor shed in case structure was to fall on the home, the garage, the back of a vehicle. So where would you best suggest to store your prepared supplies?
I don't know. I'm not sure if there really is a good answer to that. I guess you have to look around your house and see what's best survivable, I suppose. Put it in the RV.
I can give you one standpoint, just from a normal citizen, is stored in multiple places.
Yeah.
Don't put your potable water all in a single location. Don't put food stores in a single location.
And I think also if you map your neighborhood and you get together with your neighbors and maybe you go out and buy a shed or something that everybody can store all of their preparedness stuff in that shed along with other equipment. Put a lock on it. It's available to everybody in case the event happens. You can all respond to it and use those commodities.
The other thing to think about is a shed versus a larger dwelling like a home. think of what those might look like when we saw the FEMA photos afterwards. The home could be fairly well gone. If the shed is gone, it's just a shed. It just splits open and there's your supplies ready for you to grab. So if you have to make that decision, go with the smaller envelope, building envelope.
The shed concept is definitely what the fire stations have. We have them out back so that, in worst case, we're going to go tear that open and get to them. Also, you see it at the local schools for the same reason. So it all depends really on your individual situation.
I also want you to know that, CERT is just not a community program. We have taken CERT into businesses, so if you have a large business out there and you want to have response teams, we can train your response teams to help support your employees and your clients that are in your building. We've been working with Kitsap Regional Library System lately, who took it upon themselves to make sure that the number of students, children, adults that are in their libraries at any particular time are going to need help during a disaster. So it's best for them to have that CERT training available to them so that their teams can respond, as well as large businesses. I've had meetings with Pulp Resources, Central Market, Kitsap Credit Union, all large organizations in Kitsap County that think it's important to have a preparedness plan as well as have resources and their teams available to respond to not only that type of an event, but to other events that unfortunately happen in businesses today, as well as your schools. We've been doing programs in schools for many years now. We try to get into all your school districts and individual schools in order to ensure that the teachers in the schools all have roles and responsibilities during emergencies. You consider that during an earthquake event, you're going to have 20,000 plus students sitting on the grass outside their school systems, waiting for somebody to inspect their school to make sure that it's safe to go back into, looking to find out whether or not the roads are passable so they can send children home. And for a lot of people in Kitsap County who have loved ones that go to Seattle every day, they may not get home for a couple days during an event of this magnitude. So it's important that the schools are ready to respond and have the resource they need to take care of those kids while they're in those schools.
Go over here for one. Thank you, David. So just as an FYI, in respect to the left and right arms that are being raised, what we'll do is we'll do a right floor, balcony, left floor, right floor, balcony, and so on. And so anyway, so you don't have to keep your arms raised forever. Anyway, we have a question from the right floor. And sir, your name?
My name is Tom Chandra. I'm a homeowner on Long Lake Road.
Excellent. Your question?
My question has to do with the schools. Where is there a list of which schools have been retrofitted already and what the schedule is to continue to retrofit? And the same way for the bridge. I'm specifically thinking of the bridge that goes across 16 on Sedgwick. How can I find out if that bridge has been retrofitted and is resilient?
I can start a little bit on the first part with the schools. One of the recommendations that we made in the Resilient Washington Initiative was an 8-year program to actually inspect every public school in the state, evaluate the potential for ground motion amplification, have a structural engineer walk through the school, having the plans in hand to assess the vulnerability of the school to an earthquake of this magnitude. And while we have not gotten that funded, we have gotten the governor to say that he is putting together a sub-cabinet level group to oversee implementing the Resilient Washington Plan. And we estimated at the time, this was 4 or 5 years ago, that the program to inspect all of the schools, not to retrofit them, but to prioritize which ones would be in need of retrofits, would cost about $13 million over eight years, which we think is a pretty modest cost for such a huge benefit that you would get from that. And then we would be able to bring to bear some of the resources that my agency administers through the Common School Construction Fund, which is where revenue from logging on state lands goes to help build new schools or retrofit schools that are in need of that.
And we did study, 25 schools this fall?
I think it was 15, yeah.
15?
In Thurston County.
There was 20, yeah. So we are out doing that whenever we can. We asked the legislature for some money to do that. They're wrapping up the budget right now, so.
There are, however, 3,000 schools,
Yeah.
and so far we've done this for about 30.
Yeah.
So we have a ways to go.
All right, we've got another one from upstairs. Ma'am, what's your name and where are you from?
Barbara Simmons. I'm a homeowner from South Kitsap, and I have a question for Tim about the earthquake early warning system and how we can get in the loop to find out when it's going to be activated and whether there's like an app on a cell phone or something that we can connect to it for warnings.
At this point, there isn't an app yet. The system is not fully built out. It's anticipated that it will cost $16 million to fully build it out for the West Coast. So it's not only the Pacific Northwest, but it also has a node at UC Berkeley and a node at Caltech. So $16 million is annually is what it will cost to build and maintain the system. Right now, the Congress just allotted $8 million to that program, so we're about halfway there. The idea of an app is going to be kind of an interesting sort of process. The way the system is going to work is that there will be an official warning that comes out from the U.S. Geological Survey, because under the Stafford Act, they're given the responsibility to do earthquake warnings. But that is going to be available to be picked up in the private sector. And there's already a company in Southern California that is beta testing this. They're taking it and they've created, it's not a cell phone app, but it's an app for a desktop that will issue a warning if you keep your computer turned on. And so the hope is that the private sector will come up with the ingenuity to create apps for all kinds of different platforms, taking the information that comes out of the U.S. Geological Survey. We're hoping that if Congress fully funds it, we could get to that stage in 3 or 4 more years, but that's dependent on funding.
Back down here, can I get your name and where you're from?
Yes, I'm Eric Moore from South Kitsap. And earlier you discussed a little bit about water and sewer systems. But could somebody address the potential impact to rural wells and septic systems in the case of an earthquake?
That's an interesting question for which I can't give a particularly good answer. One of the first places that was studied was the 1971 Sylmar earthquake in Southern California. And in the immediate vicinity of that earthquake epicenter, by that I mean within about 15 miles, the California Geological Survey looked at the effects on water wells. And what happened is 1/3 of them dried up or saw their flows decrease, 1/3 of them increased, and 1/3 of them showed no effect. And we've seen that sort of thing in other earthquakes as well. In fact, in the 2001 Nisqually earthquake, there were 8 counties in eastern Washington that were included in the federal disaster declaration, and mostly it was for wells going dry, some of the big agricultural wells in the Columbia Basin. In general, they've not been studied individually to know what happened, but the kinds of things that happen when an earthquake causes a change in a well is that it either silts in or it causes fracturing. So the additional fracturing could cause the flow rate to go up, but silting it in would cause it to go down.
So David, I'm going to sneak an extra question in here. I hope you'll forgive me for that, but we had a great question emailed earlier today from one of our readers, and it may apply to a lot of you here tonight and watching at home, and that is with regards to propane tanks, large propane tanks installed on the exterior, of a home on the property. Our reader had asked us, what's the best way to assure that a large propane tank has been properly installed, seismic qualified? I'm not sure who can answer that.
Well, I'll take a piece of that one. Certainly in our rural Kitsap County, propane tanks are a very common thing out in the rural area. Even if you're in a more incorporated area, you're going to have natural gas or utilities that come to your house. So part of this overall preparedness component is understanding what it is that you have at your house or in your neighborhood, if it's the neighborhood group you're working with, because all of those are fairly simple to turn off. It's very common, even the fire agency, when we show up, one of our initial things is to go around and secure utilities for us during a firefighting event. But, at my house, I have a propane bottle outside. Everyone knows where the handle is. It's a simple handle on top of it to turn that off. If you have a gas meter on the side of the house, it's a quarter-turn valve. All these things can be learned about and prepared, having that wrench with you, if you will. Same thing goes with securing your electricity. But as far as your tank itself, the codes have varied over time, but they sit on little cement pedestals, and you could picture those getting bounced off of there. My house, mine is in an area of trees, and I have it cabled in so that it at least doesn't bounce away. Other places, people have put in, pilings that they can attach to, but all of those vary depending on how it's set. You can even anchor it to the cement, although the cement may bounce out. But giving it some thought, taking a look at your individual situation, knowing how to turn it off is, of course, most important following an event, because you just never know what part of the piping could be damaged. It's just better to secure it, and that way that peace of mind is there.
But someone could possibly check with the fire department that's nearest them to confirm whether it's installed properly?
Yes, as far as that goes, depending on if you're in a municipality or in the county, the Kitsap County Department of Community Development has that jurisdiction for the rural areas. In the cities, they have building departments, and certainly any fire department, if you approach, someone would be able to come out and take a look at and give some ideas, or at least help track you down to the right resources to get some more specifics.
Okay,
That's another key aspect of the Map Your Neighborhood program, is not just you knowing how to properly shut off your gas valve, but training your neighbors to do so as well. Because you may be at work, you may be over in the city, you may be out for a walk. And believe me, if an incident happens, whether it's widespread or more peculiar just to your home, and your neighbor turns off your gas for you and saves your home so that these guys don't have to show up, you will gladly buy that person beer for the rest of their life.
Yes. Excellent point. Thank you, Scott. So I have an in-person live question from?
Dawn Landry.
From?
Well, upstate New York. I just moved here to Port Orchard.
Welcome. And what is your question?
Well, being as we're new in the area, and I know a lot of Navy families are new in the area, is there an on-site or online site that people can go to find out what is the tsunami plan? Should there be a tsunami in the Gorst area, Seattle, whatever? Also, what about shelters? Do you have a plan for shelters that are set up in specific areas? Should there be a wildfire? Should there be any type of natural disaster? I'm used to dealing with blizzards and ice storms, but if you have a wildfire that people have to leave their house and go someplace else, is there a plan for shelters in specific areas that people can find out where they have to go?
Let me ask a couple of those. Obviously, we have our website that you can go to. On the website, there is a library, and it contains a lot of different plans and brochures and what-ifs on it, so that you can find out about not only the type of plans that we work with that talk about earthquake response, comprehensive emergency management plan, mitigation plan. You can find all those, as well as a lot of areas that talk about business plans, and obviously family preparedness and community preparedness. So, regarding Navy families, the Navy has, I think, a very good program on the military bases to ensure that as families arrive in Kitsap County, that they go through various orientations in order to make sure that they understand that there are earthquakes and there are other natural hazards in our area. As well as, I'm sure, what was the rest of your question? Did I get everything on there?
No tsunami signs or anything in the area where people...
There are some tsunami signs that are located at the state parks. One of the initiatives we attempted this year by getting a FEMA grant was to put tsunami signs at the county parks, and I think we're still going to do that in order to warn people that these areas, if there was an earthquake, to make sure you go high and stay dry. And that should be true for anybody that lives on waterfront property throughout Kitsap County. If you're close to the coastal areas and the ground starts shaking, what do you want to do? You want to go high and stay dry, right? So if you're in your house, you know, a nice little waterfront property, and it's low bank waterfront property, you know, the first thing you're going to do is crawl underneath your table, right, to make sure nothing falls on your head. Then after you crawl out from underneath your table, what do you want to do? Go high to stay dry, right? So that's an important piece. And as we move forward with the mitigation plan and some of the recommendations through this risk report, we'll take a look at all of those particular areas throughout Kitsap that are vulnerable to landslides as well as tsunamis, and attempt to do outreach programs as well as sign programs to let people know, tourists specifically, that as you come to be a tourist in Kitsap County, that we want you to be safe.
Mike, do you want to tell her about the shelter system?
Oh, the shelter system, absolutely. Okay, so in Kitsap County, we have an agreement with the American Red Cross to man and provide shelters. They go out and they evaluate, you know, they probably have evaluated 100 structures in Kitsap County that provide sheltering when we need it. Now, generally when we know what the event is going to be, like a winter storm or significant flooding or significant power outages, we will attempt to anticipate where the need for that shelter is going to be. Now, we don't generally advertise where our shelters are. Okay? And now during an earthquake, you know, it's important that before we start sending people to a shelter that we have to have it inspected. We want to make sure that whatever facility you are going to, you're going to be safe inside that facility, and that you're going to have all of the resources that you need while you're in that shelter.
We've got another questions from upstairs. Ma'am, where are you from and what's your name?
My name is Linda Driver, and I live in Bremerton. I'm concerned about a house I have that's on a hill, and it seems to me like it needs to be strapped to the foundation. It was built in 1928 and renovated in 62, but I know it doesn't have any earthquake straps. How did Finney Ridge establish, or how can we establish? It's more than just bolting it in. You've got to know something about the structure. Contractors who can help or advise about earthquake straps. Do we have any movement at all in our county about that?
Well, as a minimum, one of the things you can do, and this was started several years ago with the former director of emergency management, who's sitting in the audience very quietly.
Where are you, Phyllis?
And one of the things we could do, the next time you go to the Home and Garden Show at the Kitsap Fair, we put on a 2-hour training on how to retrofit your house. And we do that in a sponsorship with Homeowners Building Association, Simpson Strong Tie, and the City of Bremerton. So you can go there, as well as we have contractors who show up that can teach you how and teach you to evaluate your home, and then see what mechanisms or what mechanics do you need in order to mitigate your home from sliding off that foundation.
We've got Richard Huddy in the audience tonight, who's a member of the Bremerton City Council, and he'd like to speak to that as well.
The City of Bremerton Department of Community Development, in our building permit area, can give you the names of contractors that specialize in seismic retrofits. That's what you're looking for, a seismic retrofit. And there's been a fairly good number of seismic retrofits that have already been done in the city. So we have experience with that and can help guide you through it.
And of course, the other piece about, you know, retrofitting is if you've ever had the opportunity to replace your water heater, and if you're on natural gas, you do need a permit in order to do that, simply because you have to make sure that the gas lines are hooked up correctly, and because that's the last thing you want flying around inside your garage during an earthquake, you know, especially with the flame next door to it, which is probably in your heater system, you know, and you're not going to be able to get out in time in order to stop that explosion from happening. So it's important that you make sure that as you replace that gas water heater, that make sure you have the appropriate people look at it so you feel comfortable that that's safe for an earthquake?
Since we're having a lot of practical questions about, how to retrofit your home non-structural, I just want to put a plug out there that if you go to ready.gov, there is a how-to series that walks you step by step how to, make sure that your propane tank is safe, as well as your water heater and how to strap down your electronic equipment. And it even talks about how much it might cost you. So I encourage you to go look there and see what you're able to do on your own. Ready.gov.
I have Michael down here with a question.
Yeah, I'm Mike Walton. I'm the director of the Kitsap Public Facilities District and a resident in Central Kitsap. But I have a history question for you. I happened to be a 7-year-old second grader in Shelton in 1949 when that earthquake happened. My recollection is that that was a 7-something earthquake. If any of you know what that was, the second part of the question is, was that a quake on the Seattle fault, or was that on a different fault?
Well, a couple of things. Initially, that was called a 7.1, but the way that we would calculate the magnitude of that now, we would call it a 6.8. And there are lots of different magnitude scales, and the reason that the magnitude scale that was used for that isn't the one we would use today is because we didn't have a Pacific Northwest seismograph network in those days. So that magnitude was actually assigned to that earthquake from Pasadena, California, using what's called a surface wave magnitude, which is just a sample of the energy. So pardon? A 6.8, which is what it was, is a good-sized earthquake. And no, it was not on the Seattle fault. There are 3 different kinds of earthquakes that we get in this area, and they're all related to the subduction zone. So the subduction zone has the Juan de Fuca plate diving under the Pacific plate, or the North America plate. And so right at that interface are the subduction zone earthquakes, the Cascadia that we've been talking about. And because the Juan de Fuca plate is being pushed to the north by the Pacific plate, that interaction is what squeezes the ground above it and causes faults like the Seattle fault. But the third kind of earthquake that we get is down in the subducting slab itself as it's being pulled into the lower part of the earth, what's called the mantle. It gets pulled apart, and these are what are called Benioff zone earthquakes. It's the same kind of earthquake we had in 2001, the Nisqually earthquake. And in fact, the 1949 earthquake was almost in the identical place. So it was at a depth of about 55 kilometers below the surface. And so the reason that it was not as damaging as would be a similar sized earthquake on the Seattle fault is because it's so deep. So if you think about the light coming from a light bulb, you have a 60-watt light bulb, but the intensity of the light gets less the farther away from it you get because of geometric spreading. And the same happens with the earthquake. So when it's down at 55 kilometers, the energy spreads out in all directions, and the energy that hits the surface where you were is only a small percentage of that total energy that was generated. And the other thing that happens is that as those seismic waves are passing through the earth, they lose some energy due to friction that's lost as heat. So the Nisqually earthquake and the 1949 earthquake were larger than the Northridge earthquake of 1994, but it caused about 20 times more property losses than did either of those earthquakes in 49 or 01.
Okay, I'm going to sneak a second question in, but Tim, I want to invite you to my next home cocktail party. You are, I love this guy. Fascinating.
Where is this coming from? I can't.
Right here.
I can't see you.
Okay, nice home in Silverdale, overlooks Dyes Inlet. You're invited. Ed Wolf will be there. Anyway, quick email question. Show of hands, how many of you on the panel have earthquake insurance for your home? One, should we have it? Should we have it? Opinions?
I don't have it because the deductibles are so high, and they're intentionally set to be so high, so that they tend not to pay unless your house is totaled. And an example is my sister, who lives in Northridge and was affected by the Northridge earthquake. Her deductible was $43,000. She had $44,000 worth of damage.
Oh my gosh, wow.
So the insurance did a trivial amount of good for her. And while it would be reasonably inexpensive for my house, I could probably get earthquake insurance for an additional $400 or $500 a year. The deductible would be on the order of 10 to 20% of the value of the house.
Okay, so in other words, it's really an individual decision.
Absolutely.
Okay. So
my house is newer.
All right, thank you. Anybody else on the panel for that? Okay. So we do have a question from a young lady here from
East Bremerton.
And your name is?
Judy Brophy.
And your question?
I have two questions. What was the date of the New Yorker article that you referred to? And also, should we have our trees inspected to see how they would fare in the event of an earthquake?
Great question.
I believe the
New Yorker article came out in July, I believe, of last year.
Last summer? Okay. Okay. And the trees?
And trees?
Trees, yes. Make sure your trees are healthy. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
so
just good practice.
I think this year the trees have already been tested.
Yeah.
One of the more important ways that trees figure into the issue of earthquakes is not so much trees snapping, because that's very uncommon in earthquakes, but rather earthquake-induced landslides that will bring the trees down with them. And so I think that's more of having your slope, if you live on a slope, assessed for landslide susceptibility.
I have a question. My fiance died in the landslide. I don't need any pity or anything like that, but some things are going to hit us from behind. So all this preparing, every bit of everything that you guys do up here, is I thank you so much for your hard work, whether you get paid for it or not. I'm sure most of you guys would be up there. I have dedicated my life now to doing things. I'm a drone pilot, all sorts of things. I'm working on a documentary about the Oso landslide, but she didn't know, because she bought a foreclosed house on Steelhead Drive, Amanda Lennox, that she was in a seismic zone. She was just a 33-year-old happy-go-lucky gal that had lost 247 pounds on gastric bypass surgery, got her whole life together, perfect, was losing too much weight, and then just gets blown away in the morning. Thank God she had a little tiff with her girlfriends in the morning, and they got out, but the TV repairman, the other guy, didn't get out there. But, my biggest thing that I have, and I mean, it's probably gonna upset some people, but it's all that matters is our lives in here. Who cares about the property? But our lives are in the property. And so we have to deal with it synergistically. So I just thank all of you guys. I wasn't able to go to the DEM thing. I kind of didn't have a panic attack thing, but the CERT thing, it was just too hard, too fresh with everything. I had the opportunity to meet President Obama, but I didn't want to meet him so I could go. I met the president because my fiance died, So it just, I'm doing anything and everything I can do. I have 3 or 4 generators. I have phone system stuff set up. I'm a ham radio operator, everything. Everybody has to learn how to do everything. You don't have to be good at it. You just know how to get to it. Who knows what, get a hold of them. But I thank you guys for all of this and everything, but everybody individually needs to go, what do I care about? And if you don't care about a loved one first and then yourself, then I don't care if you don't like me, but your priorities are wrong.
It's a good illustration why we're here. There was someone waiting. Let's do one last question and then let's go to small.
Dave, we've got another from upstairs.
We'll do. How about this and one over here? Wrap it up.
Sorry, did I get out of line? My apologies. My name's Steve Loop. I live in East Bremerton. I've lived here since 1997. Before that, I grew up in Southern California. So I was in Northridge, I was in Whittier, I was in Landers, I was in, yeah. I'm used to the ground shaking. It doesn't bother me so much.
Could you move back?
It doesn't bother me, no. I got a few questions. I'll try to make them quick, and it kind of involves a little bit of everybody. Number one, those of us that have lived here a while, we know there are 3 ways in and 3 ways out of this county, right? 2 of them involve a bridge. Has the county assessed a way that when 2 of those 3s are gone, one of them floats, I suspect that's going to sink, even though it's brand new. Has anyone thought of a plan when we're isolated for 5 to 7 days to get that up and running first? Because, like you said there, Mr. James, we're going to be on our own. So, has Kitsap County thought of a way? Hey, we need to get supplies here because there's going to be no way. We're going to be on our own. Has Kitsap County thought of that? That's number 1. Hold on. I got a list. Hold on. Number 2.
I'll forget, so let's take one at a time. How about that?
Okay, go.
All right. So, a couple of years ago, the Puget Sound region received a $5 million grant to do catastrophic planning throughout the region. And one of the things as part of that grant was to evaluate vulnerable transportation areas throughout Kitsap County, and we identified a few, particularly our Achilles heel, which is Gorst, right? Everybody agree with that? So as well as Agate Pass, and we looked at are there ways to go around those areas. As part of that catastrophic planning, Washington State Department of Transportation also looked at, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, the Hood Canal Bridge. Those bridges may or may not receive some damage from an earthquake, but they're going to be inspected right away. They know it's a lifeline to Kitsap County, and they know it's important to us to get that open. Other than that, it's looking at, there's been a lot of initiative this year as we move towards the very large subduction zone earthquake drill that we're doing in June involving several states, probably close to 40 or 50 counties in Oregon, Washington, and I think Idaho is playing, and I don't get that. But so all these organizations are playing in this event, and as we move towards this event, it gives us an opportunity to look at those type of threats or those type of vulnerabilities and see how we can do a better job of closing the gaps on those type of issues. So one of the things we're looking at is again going back to that catastrophic plan and seeing how we're going to work around some of those areas.
Thank you. Second question. Priorities of first responders. Obviously, if we have a 7.1 that's right off here, sorry, microphone, there we go. For first responders, what is the priorities for first responders there? Now, obviously, when it happens right away, people will be calling, hey, trees down in my house, blah, blah, blah. What is for first responders? What is the number one?
Obviously, during an event like this, we want to make sure that we don't overwhelm 911 centers, okay? I'll tell you a good example. Everybody remembers when the house blew up, right? Okay? Now, when the house blew up, what did you think? You probably thought it was something on one of the bases, right? Okay? There were 300 phone calls to 911 in the first hour. Okay? Now, even during winter storms, there's a significant number of storm or phone calls that go into 911. And through 911, we activate our Emergency Operations Center, which is across the hall, and we help them filter through all those different 911 calls that are coming in so we find out where the real problems are in Kitsap County. And one of the things we defined a number of years ago is a process we refer to as changing gears. And what changing gears is establishes a county network system that looks at high priority issues that are going on in Kitsap County. So Chief Wright sitting next to me, they activate an emergency operations center at the fire level, and he responds to the most important stuff, the Pri 1s and the Pri 2s that are important to life safety. All of those other things are going to go to Steve, and he's going to manage those things at the local level or at his level to ensure that he has the resources available to do that. So that's a common approach that we use in order to ensure that we're putting our best foot forward and making sure we're taking a look at the priorities in Kitsap County during any particular event that takes place.
All right, we've got, can we get to one upstairs here?
Really quick, this is important. Because something we haven't discussed here is liquefaction. I went to the DNR website, that link is broken.
No.
So is there a map, is there a Kitsap County map for liquefaction? Because with the Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand, you'll see the pictures of the cars just sitting there in the middle of nowhere. That's a discussion we haven't had here, that's very important.
The link has changed, but it's still there. Just get on Google and search Kitsap County liquefaction map.
I looked at it today as of 3 o'clock, it's not there.
The other thing you can do is Google Washington Geological Survey Open File Report 2004-20.
All right, sir, and we've got one from upstairs. What's your name and where are you from?
Oh, I live on the Bremerton waterfront. Should we be worried about a 10, 20, or 30-foot tsunami?
That's a good question.
Are you asking which one of those you should be worried about?
Yes.
As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be doing some modeling. The height of the tsunami is initially determined by the uplift of the seafloor, but it's seriously modified by the depth of the water column and the width of the channel that it's passing through. The steepness of the bathymetry and topography. Without actually doing this modeling that I'm talking about, I wouldn't be able to tell you at your specific location what it would be. But if it's a repeat of the event that happened 1,000 years ago, the initial wave height would be the same as the amount of uplift of the seafloor, which was 21 feet. But tsunamis can be amplified and de-amplified as they pass through the Puget Sound.
All right, I think Mike has one over here.
I have a question from a gentleman named Bob Richardson from Gig Harbor. And great, good to have you here. And your question is?
My question is for Tim. The Tohoku earthquake that happened in Japan a couple of years back that created Fukushima, scientists tell us that the subduction zone called Cascadia will be a twin sister. That produced an earthquake, that produced a tsunami of 130 feet, and we had liquefaction there in Japan for over 5 minutes. What can we expect here with regard to liquefaction? It has to be a shaking of 5 minutes, 7 minutes. What can we anticipate?
Well, I haven't heard that any scientists have said that we would expect the same thing here. Our subduction zone is extremely different from the one in Japan. That being said, though, we learned a lot from the Tohoku event. And as the gentleman over here brought up, we have published liquefaction susceptibility maps everywhere in the state. Their reconnaissance in general, although there are some areas for which we have very detailed ones. That's not the case for the Bremerton area, but the reconnaissance ones are available here. And it is the case that the longer the ground shakes, the more likely susceptible soils are to liquefy. But it's also a function of the strength of the ground shaking. And so a Cascadia event, the slip on the fault will be under the shoreline and offshore from there. So the distance from the closest part of the rupture to here will actually be on the order of 50 miles or 60 miles. And so the strength of ground shaking will be much, much smaller than it would be for a Seattle fault earthquake in the same area. So you would expect more liquefaction from a Seattle fault event in the Bremerton area in general than you would from a Cascadia event.
Okay, thank you. One more comment I'd like to make is my wife and I got CERT qualified 4 years ago. And so many of the questions I hear coming from the people in the audience, they would be answered if you became CERT qualified. It's so simple to do. It is so smart to do. You can stand alone knowing so much that has been asked here, as well as the people that have answered questions up on the panel. We thank you very much for being with us. But the questions that you answered to these people were answered oftentimes in our CERT classes. That being said, everybody here, if you got CERT qualified, you could stand alone and you could do what my wife and I have done, mapped our neighborhood, and we got our church ready for the worst case scenario, and we even started our own business called Ultimate Preparedness.
Good testimonial. Mike, come to the front. We have one more. And I only say this because this girl's making my arm feel tired. You've had it up the whole time. We'll have this as the last questions. I don't know if you guys are willing to, are you going to hang around in the lobby at all? For a few minutes. It sounds like our guests will hang out in the lobby once we finish up so you could have some one-on-one interaction. But let's make this the last question.
Thank you, Dave. Your name?
Katie English.
You're from where?
Bremerton. So I have a question about, I know gas explosions have been kind of a major thing here lately. Is there a way that, do y'all partner with Cascade Gas and do things like the earthquake actuated gas shutoff valves that shut off when an earthquake does happen? That way it kind of mitigates the way y'all have to respond to gas explosions if we're at work and everybody's house is
blown up,
exploding everywhere.
I think that's yours.
Well, certainly the idea of getting that utility controlled so that if there is a potential for a leak, that does not happen. There are valves that are available through the gas companies, and I don't know of any programs here in South Kitsap that has them retrofitted in, but it'd certainly be a question that you could ask your local provider about. I know my parents have one on their house. I looked at it here just on Easter, and so they are out there. And again, it's just that piece of one more thing to keep it from getting, loose in the house, if you will, so to speak, because it is a concern for us, and it should be a concern for each of you as that initial thought once you've dusted yourself off.
There is a potential downside to those, and that's that if they're set to be too sensitive and they shut the gas off when you didn't experience strong enough ground shaking, you have to have the gas company come in to reset it. And in the Northridge earthquake, for instance, a lot of people had gotten those valves, and they ended up being without gas, many of them for more than a month, because the number of people who came in from all over the place to reset those valves were severely strained. So yes, they're a good idea, but be careful with them.
One last time, say thank you to these people. And I would like to say thank you to you all again. This is very, very moving to see so many people interested in a topic we're covering. And I think it's so important. Scott, when he was talking earlier, had the quote, relationships get stronger when you get into these neighborhood groups. And I think this is a good example of that right here. Again, if you didn't get a copy of this, kitsapsun.com/earthquakes is the site. That is there. You can download one, share with your friends, share around. When you go to kitsapsun.com, I also just want to encourage everyone, if you're not a subscriber now, please consider it. Keep supporting us. This kind of in-depth stuff, this kind of community engagement, I think it's important around here, and we can't do it without our readers. And then the last thing, we've had a couple, this is several events we've had here and got a good crowd out. Our next one will be May 13th. That's a Friday night. We're going to, in collaboration with the Admiral Theater, put on a documentary about the Elwha River restoration. It's called Return of the River. So we'll be promoting it in paper, but write down on your calendars, Friday, May 13th. Come back, meet your friends again, hang out with Kitsap Sun fellow readers. And thank you and good night.